Welcome back to Wellness Wave. Thanks for tuning in this morning to ride the wave with us. Each week our goal is to give you at least one suggestion that will make your life a little better. We also want to let you know that everything we discuss in the show is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Always seek the guidance of your doctor. We have a really great show for you today. I have Karen Spencer with me. Karen, welcome to Wellness Wave.
Well, thank you for having me, Phil.
She was also on my radio show, and we had a really good show. You guys are going to be shocked what you hear today because Karen has been before the legislature talking about fluoride, and was really impressed with what she knows. She has encyclopedia knowledge about this stuff. So, Karen, how did you get involved in this journey?
Well, it was a long and circuitous path, Phil. I was having a normal second pregnancy, and all of a sudden I got really, really sick. And the doctor just said, well, some pregnancies are like this. And so I just had to get through the pregnancy. And I almost lost my child several times. After I got through the pregnancy, I was still sick. And the tummy problems and the rashes and all the issues I was having, the headaches and everything, were also shared by my children. And so I went to the doctor again. Well, you know, I don't know what it is. And I felt it was something in my food, so I was being organic. I was being very, very careful because whenever I ate or drank anything, I would get sick. And so one day I made myself an organic vegetable soup, and I ate it, and I sat down, and I was sick again. And I said, what could it be? And I realized, oh my God, it's the water. They had started fluoridating our water system during my pregnancy. They had started on July 1st. And I date the start of my illness to the 4th of July weekend because my husband and I were supposed to go away on a trip. And I was so sick, I didn't think I could go, and I just never, ever got better. So I went to bottled water and then filtered water. And when I switched to bottled water, that was an improvement, not all better, but an improvement. When I switched to filtered water, I was also diagnosed with Lyme disease and chronic Lyme disease and Epstein-Barr and IBS and all these other illnesses which I accepted because I had a good quality multi-stage water filter underneath my sink, and so I thought that was doing it for me. It was not. So finally, and I knew I couldn't use fluoridated toothpaste because I got mouth sores when I did. So finally in 2014, I was getting pretty desperate. The arthritis was so bad, and I was in chronic pain. I was beginning to consider suicide. And I said, wait a minute, let's find something a little less drastic than that. Let's go back to bottled water for everything because I was still suspicious of the water, but I figured it just couldn't be the water. In less than 2 weeks, all of my symptoms went away. I had had decades of pain and accepted my doctor's dismissals and diagnoses, and it was something in the water. Well, I'm an analyst, and I'm very good at research. I always have been, so I started digging into it. And I found the science going back. I went all the way back to 1915 and 1925, but I found the science in every decade documenting all of my symptoms. They knew. And they knew it was particularly bad for pregnant women, but they decided they were going to go ahead anyway. So I was absolutely furious. The Public Health Service researchers had written in 1950s that they had to drop a percentage of their test subjects because of acute reactions to fluoride in the controlled dose study. Well, as I said, I was pregnant, and I'm reading the descriptions of some of the problems that these women were having, and they were identical to mine. So the Public Health Service, CDC, Health and Human Services, whatever you want to call, whatever branch was in vogue at that point in time, decided in the 1950s that my life and the life of my children and my grandchildren did not matter because they felt that it was the greater good that children who didn't brush their teeth might have one fewer cavity than we would suffer with autoimmune disease and inflammatory diseases for our entire lives.
Well, I think the other thing is, and Karen, you're the expert in this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was my understanding that where the fluoride actually came from, it's a waste product on when they're processing aluminum. And what I found interesting, the same thing happened with what they called seed oils. Seed oils used to be basically to lubricate things. It was a big waste product. Well, we don't know what to do with all this stuff. We could make some money, you know, by basically, they probably had they paid somebody to do a study that say, well, if you take the fluoride, you have less cavities, something like that. But again, they're not looking at the, you know, obviously the bigger problem, the other problems it's causing. And I know the American Dental Association, everybody was on board with this. So again, it goes back to there's another way to make money at this. We have a waste product. What can we do with this waste product? We can give it to everybody. We can put it in your water supply.
Yeah. Somebody from the EPA once said the EPA's solution to pollution is dilution. Yes, fluoride that we use in our water treatment plant originates either in the phosphate fertilizer industry waste or in manufacturing waste, primarily aluminum factories, but any factories that uses fluoride. And what they do is they take the scrubber liquor that they use on the smokestacks to prevent this pollution going into the air, and they package it up and they sell it to communities to dribble into their water. They claim it's a naturally occurring mineral. Well, fluoride is a mineral like asbestos and lead is a mineral. We should not be consuming it. And the stuff that naturally occurs in the environment is bonded closely with calcium and magnesium, which are nutrients and which also interfere with the bioassimilation of the fluoride into the body. When you're adding fluoride to soft water, water without so many minerals from this waste product, there is no calcium or magnesium associated with it, so you are getting it all. So if you had 2 glasses of water, Phil, one had calcium fluoride in it and the other had some of this chemical fluoride in it, and you drank it, you get the same dose, you have the same concentration, you get the same dose theoretically, but your body is going to absorb more of it. When I was really sick and trying to figure out what to do, I found that a powdered calcium drink did help me somewhat get through the day. And so I was using that powdered calcium drink. And in other parts of the world, they do recommend people take calcium supplements in order to mitigate the damage done to them by fluoride. Now, it's not going to eliminate it. Fluoride is a poison in any dose, but it will help you to absorb less of it into your body.
Right, and so that listeners understand, there's something called chelation therapy, and I think what you're talking about. So in other words, what people do, if you have heavy metals in your body, they'll take the blood out, they'll run it through a filter, and they'll bind it to something else and take the heavy metals out. So I'm guessing that's what's happening with the calcium and the fluoride. It's chelating, it's binding to it.
It's covalent bonds, and it is preventing it somewhat. But you know, there is no really do-it-yourself method of preventing fluoride poisoning. See, some people who really should know better say, "Oh, just get a Brita filter or something." No. The little filters, the countertop filters, the simple little filters, the inexpensive filters you get, do not take the fluoride out of the water, no matter what they may say. As I said, I depended on a filter to my detriment for decades because it was supposed to be reducing the fluoride, and it wasn't. There are some filters that are better than others, but the only thing you can do to protect yourself is to get political, because it has to come out of our water. Just think, Phil. We only consume approximately 1% of the water that we have pumped into our house. Now, they're adding all this fluoride waste to all of the water. 99% of it, 98 to 99% if you consider animal consumption, is going to wastewater with all those fluoridation chemicals, which, by the way, are contaminated with arsenic and lead and other things. And that is damaging plant life, insect life, animal life, and it's seeping down into our groundwater. It's seeping down into our natural ecosystem. So we are really taking the pollution, the air pollution. My old town, Gloucester, got its fluoride from Shanghai, China. And I said, we are literally, we're literally putting Shanghai smog into our drinking water. Shanghai smog.
So we're taking China's waste products and we're putting it in our water.
We've all seen the pictures of how polluted their air is. Well, they're packaging it up and putting it in our water supplies.
And we're paying for it.
And we're paying for it. Because it might, a little thing, let's just get this right out of the way, and then I'm going to move into the interesting stuff. The late 20th century and early 21st century studies have shown that fluoride in water really doesn't make much of a difference in teeth. It is clinically inconsequential, maybe a fraction of a single cavity less. The pro-fluoride scientists have said it's clinically inconsequential. They've also noted from the big national studies that children drinking fluoridated water have more lead in their blood. And you know what this dynamic duo of scientists said? They said, well, the worst impacts of lead take many years to manifest, where cavities are a more immediate concern.
Whoa.
And then they say, well, it might be clinically inconsequential on an individual basis, but if you multiply it out, this is like 1 million cavities, and that's a lot of cavities. That's like saying if a woman can make a baby in 9 months, 9 women can make a baby in 1 month. You don't multiply it out to save at the dentist. You're not saving any, it's not doing any good for your teeth. It's actually damaging your teeth. If you've ever seen people with white, brown, or black stains on their teeth from the fluoride exposure while they were young, there's all kinds of issues. But even if it was good for teeth, let's look what it really does to you. I'm part of a lawsuit, as you know, against the EPA having to do with fluoridation. The lawsuit was heard in February and March, and we're expecting a verdict any day on this. We had 5 fabulous expert scientists who testified that the science is showing low levels of fluoride, much lower than what we're putting in our water, is even affecting babies' brains when the mothers are drinking the water prior to birth, or when they're using the water for formula. And it results in more learning disabilities like attention deficit disorder, lower IQ, all kinds of issues. And they are unanimous on it. And this isn't just one study. These are dozens of studies. I think it's approaching 100 human studies in recent years showing the same effect. And then you have the other studies on other parts of the body that it's having ill effects. But the focus right now is on the brain damage. And as I said, I was pregnant when they started fluoridating, and I almost lost my child. And he has symptoms and disabilities consistent, low-grade disabilities. He's got a wife and kids and working and everything else, but, he has these symptoms that are consistent with what these studies are showing. They're poisoning us from womb to tomb.
Right, and you were saying the other thing I heard before years ago. I heard this. I think it's called the Children's Defense Fund, that they were starting with this whole thing, and they said lowering kids' IQs, and there's all kinds of studies on that. They can do what they call an epidemiological study where they can look all of this stuff. So I heard about this years ago, and just so the audience doesn't get too upset. Karen looked it up. Leicester doesn't have any fluoride in their water.
No, Leicester, I looked it up. You have, according to the last CCR annual water report that I was able to find online, 0.04 parts per million for fluoride from natural erosion from rocks, and that would be calcium fluoride, and that is extremely low, and I would not worry about drinking that in the least.
Yeah, so your ward is fine. When you were on my radio show, my sister looked it up, where she was, and to make sure. I guess the point we're going to make, Karen, I know several times they went up before Worcester to try to get in the Worcester water, and there was a big pushback, and they never got it in. So I guess what we're saying, if they ever come to your town, and they want to put fluoride in it, we'll certainly give you Karen's information. Karen can give you tons and tons of studies on this.
Well, you can go to fluoridelawsuit.com. And Brenda, who's a named plaintiff in the lawsuit that I'm part of against the EPA, and I put together this website, and there is a list of close to 200, I think, scientific studies published in peer-reviewed journals since 2015 showing the harm of fluoridation and the lack of any benefit, really, for the teeth. So we put it out there. The Fluoride Action Network also has a website, fluoridealert.org. Moms Against Fluoride have a website. I like ours. My baby's prettiest. The annotated bibliography is very easy to use. And as a matter of fact, there are a couple of studies that have been published since the lawsuit that I'd like to mention. One is an autoimmunity website, and that's my thing, autoimmune issues and inflammation. And it was a very good study, and it got really deep into it. And it starts right out saying there is no need for fluoride in the human body. And they say long-term exposure will damage the human body. And they've detailed, you'd enjoy it, the chemical reactions. They find that it disrupts the homeostasis of the immune system, that it has a suppressing effect on the T cells. Anybody who knows anything about immunity knows, you hear about antibodies, but the T cells are the big guns. And it goes on to a lot of stuff about how chemically fluoride consumption, especially chronic fluoride consumption, even in low doses, is damaging your immunity. And this was just published since after the trial. And it also wrote that if you have fluoride-induced autoimmune suppression, you're more likely to be vulnerable to bacterial infections, viral infections, parasitic infections, because your immune system cannot fight it off, because fluoride is suppressing that immune system and damaging its ability to function as it's supposed to. Another study that just came out since the trial was, this is great. This was out of Los Angeles, California. All right, they had approximately 500 women and their infants, and they looked at the children at age 3. And they track the mother's fluoride levels during their pregnancy. And they do this by measuring the fluoride in their urine. Because as I said, some women are going to be drinking more water, they're going to be getting more fluoride. And they found that the women who had the higher levels of fluoride at 0.68 parts megs per liter, which is the equivalent of 0.68 parts per million for concentration, their children were almost twice as likely to have symptoms consistent with learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorder. They were more likely to have emotional outbursts and, anxiety and total meltdowns. They were more likely to have sleep disturbances. They couldn't sleep. They complained about sleep. Again, the fluoride is an endocrine disruptor as well as an immune system suppressor, and it's messing up your ability to sleep. It affects your melatonin, it affects your pineal gland, it does all kinds of things. And I was talking about those teenage studies where earlier they found, the national government found that teenagers living in fluoridated communities had more sleep disorders. And they also had more they had markers in their blood indicating they were more likely to have kidney and liver disease as adults. This is what long-term fluoride exposure does to you, even at low doses. And anybody with any gastrointestinal issues, whether it's IBS or colitis or any what's the other, celiac disease, this is going to worsen those conditions. any inflammatory condition like arthritis. Oh my God, I was diagnosed with arthritis in my 30s, and I suffered with it. And then suddenly in 2014, when I get fluoride totally out of my diet, my arthritis goes away overnight. Decades of arthritis from when I was a young woman into my 60s, and then it goes away. Now, the damage done to my bones, that did not go away because fluoride is stored in your bones, and it is an inflammatory chemical. So it's causing all kinds of issues, including inflammatory arthritis, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. I don't care what you call it, what you diagnosed it. It is bad.
Have you had a bone scan done?
Oh, yeah.
A density? And what is your bone density like?
Bad. Really bad.
Okay.
And I was taking calcium, and I was doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Really bad. Now, I will admit, from my reading of the literature, 15 to 20% of the population has autoimmune issues like me. And I will admit I might be in the 5% who's most sensitive. But it doesn't matter. It's getting into everybody's bones, and it's bad. Dr. Hans Muhlenberg was a great man, great doctor. He said that a percentage of the population is going to have an immediate acute impact from being exposed to fluoridated water, like I did. Another percentage is going to develop problems over the subsequent 6 months after they've been exposed to it, where their body just starts to break down. But the whole population is going to be more vulnerable to health calamities due to chronic long-term exposure to fluoride. He was right on the money. Aaron Brockovich, who signed a letter that I wrote back in 2015, has said, you know, fluoride is dangerous. Your city governments have no business putting something in the water supply with no control over dose to medicate the population. And if they continue to do it, they are morally corrupt. And that is absolutely right, because you can't get away from it when it's in water. I don't want to eat out any place. I don't want to eat at a neighbor's house. I don't want to go to a restaurant. I bring my own water wherever I go. It is terrible. So did I talk about the Madre study out of California yet?
You were talking about California and teenagers.
I think I did go into that. You and I were talking before the show, too. So, you know, we know that these children are more likely to have emotional outbursts, sleep disorders, learning disabilities. We know all of this is happening. Brush the teeth and take away the lollipop. You know, and there have been studies done. You know, there's one study done, I think it was in 2001, that one of the authors was a big-time fluoridation guy, and God love the other authors, they wrote down in it, they were looking at Head Start kids, and they were looking at different ethnicities, and they wrote several times, fluoridation made no impact. It didn't matter. What made an impact was whether the mother was putting the baby to bed with a bottle or not. But, you know, the Madre study out of California was interesting because they were looking at the 3-year-olds, and they were saying, okay, they're more likely to have anxiety and sleep disturbances and learning disabilities and all this and odd behaviors. Also, difficulty with executive function, you know, making decisions and stuff. Well, they're only 3 years old. You got that bunch of symptoms in a teenager. He's also going to be aggressive and violent because he's upset. He can't make good decisions. He doesn't know what's going on with him, and it's a problem. And you know what the American Dental Society said about that study, that Madre study out of California? They said, well, it's just one study. Yeah, one of 100. And because this was primarily a Hispanic population, it wasn't representative of the United States as a whole. Therefore, we don't think it should be considered, and we continue to support fluoridation. What the hell? They're saying that anybody who has a Hispanic heritage, and they've done the same thing with blacks. They know that black Americans are more likely to have ill effects from fluoride as well. They're saying, well, because that's not the whole United States. That's not the majority. I'm going to say we're going to ignore them. Everybody's going to have to drink it. Too bad, Karen, that you're allergic. You have to drink it. Too bad if you're Hispanic. Too bad if you're black. Too bad if you have inflammatory bowel disease. Too bad if you're pregnant. We think it's the greater good, says the American Dental Association, to try to prevent a kid from having a cavity, even though their own studies, 2 studies in the United States and 2 studies in the United Kingdom, have found that it's clinically inconsequential. If you love fluoride so much, you can buy the water. I have to buy water that doesn't have fluoride in it. Why don't you buy the water that does have fluoride if you want it so much? Or brush your teeth with it if you don't think brushing your teeth with it is good enough. I won't brush my teeth with it, but if you want to brush your teeth with it, go ahead. Of course, you're spitting it down the drain and polluting the groundwater too. So there are a lot of dentists, like the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, and their website is IAOMT.org, has wonderful fluoride facts. They have a 2017 position paper against any fluoride use. Not in the dental offices, not in the water, not in the toothpaste. They're totally against it because they've looked into the science. But I'll tell you this. A dental colleague of mine told me, well, you know, Karen, dentists, from small to good-sized pediatric dentist practice, they are grossing between $80,000 and $400,000 a year on fluoride treatments. When you go to the dentist and you get your kid and they say, oh, give a fluoride treatment. If the community has fluoridation, they'll say, well, we've got fluoridation, this is good, but I just want to be sure, your insurance is going to pay for it, belt and suspenders, let's put some fluoride on your teeth, just kids' teeth, just to make sure they're clean and they don't get cavities. And if your community doesn't have fluoridation, he says, well, we don't have fluoridation, you absolutely must get the fluoride treatment to prevent cavities. Well, 50% of that gross is going directly to profit to the dentist. So your dentist is making between like $50,000 and $200,000 a year selling fluoride treatments to you in the dental office. Now, many of them believe that they're doing good things. They're not all sociopathic criminals, but some are. Some are, and I know dentists, wonderful dentists who have spoken out publicly and really have had a hard time professionally because of it. I know other dentists who privately will say, well, I don't use it, or I won't use it, or, well, I'll use it if the patient wants it because it's profitable, but I don't talk about it much. But they don't want to say anything because it's important to their bottom line.
And I think it could just simply be ignorance, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because I know that I see this with medical doctors all the time. They think a good example is statins or all these things that they give people, and or even metformin for diabetes. There's a lot better options. But again, they call it standard of care, and it's got to be the same thing with dental. This is the standard of care. This is what everybody does. And again, they're working a zillion hours a week. They probably don't have time, or maybe they just ignore it.
Well, yes, many of them are ignorant. Others are willfully blind, but some are wantonly dishonest because it is so profitable for them. They have built their careers in fluoridation promotion.
But the easiest person to fool is yourself too. So I'm thinking, they're seeing it, and maybe they see it somewhere, and this doesn't make any sense, and right, they're willfully ignorant, I think is the word you use.
Willful blindness, there's ignorance and there's willful blindness, and the reason I'm here today, Phil, and the reason I came on your radio show, and the reason I'm writing what I'm writing, is because nobody should be able to claim willful blindness any longer. Now, you don't see these studies on the news, much to our frustration. You don't see this Tosca lawsuit that I was part of, a member representative on behalf of the Food and Water Watch against the EPA. That's not being put on the news. We see stuff about, Trump and Stormy Daniels and all kinds of Karen Reed murder case and all kinds of junk stuff on the news, and I'm sick of watching it. We should be hearing about this.
Okay, we're coming up at the end of the show. So how do they reach you again if they want any information?
Well, fluoridelawsuit.com. That's actually Brenda's website, but you can go there and you can go, actually the blog post also has a blog from me, and you can find my information there. You can find the science there. You can find a series of letters we sent the CDC along with the CDC's response to us, which I thought was very interesting. We even did a video response to them. So that's the best place to go.
Or email me, philgeorge@charter.net, and I'll shoot it right over to Karen. Thanks for tuning in, guys. One of the most common questions I'm asked as a biochemist and health coach is, what are the best supplements to take? Choosing supplements is a tricky business. Many companies have poor quality control and questionable ingredients. In the past, I had to send clients to several different websites. I am now able to offer one-stop shopping for all the quality brands I recommend, with no shipping cost and a lower price in most cases. Just email me, philgeorge@charter.net, for a free consult.